This is The Backstory with Omobola Stephen. It's a balanced, objective, unbiased and disruptive conversation on government and politics. We shine more light on what has not worked and what would make it work. And now, to the finest personable and engaging host extraordinaire, Omobola Stephen. Tune in.
And what will make it work. On today's show, I have Richard Villasana on the show, who is the leading international authority on immigration issues and foster families. He's also the founder of the nonprofit Forever Homes for Foster Kids. Welcome with me on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, Richard Villasana.
Very happy to be here.
Very happy to have you on the show, Richard. Now, I'm looking forward to your worthwhile time with you on the show. Now, we'll be talking about the foster kids who are left at the Mexico-U.S. border and what the U.S. government is doing in this regard. Now, Richard, how does the organization get these foster kids or foster children cases?
So it's very unique in that we have cases brought to us. So we don't have foster children in a building. We provide that service to agencies across the United States where, again, they bring us their cases. And the reason they bring cases to us is that often those are children who have family living outside the U.S. in Latin America.
All right. Good to know.
Excellent. So once we get these cases, then we go into action, and our job then is to try to find their relatives, because the whole idea, at least in the United States, is a concept called family finding. And this is where the idea was when a child comes into foster care, and they come in for many reasons: sexual, physical abuse, serious neglect, starvation, just inattention, children who are as young as 1 year old who are found wandering the streets in their diaper. These are images that people normally don't think about, maybe, when it comes to the United States, but this is, in fact, some of the worst situations that children find themselves in. And so at that point, agencies, maybe the police or the foster care caseworkers, bring them into the system. And at that point, the idea is if we can find enough relatives, one of them, like an uncle, an aunt, or a grandparent, will step up and say, look, I'll take the child. So the child moves from foster care into what we call kinship care. And I think most people would agree that having a child stay in family, not necessarily with the people who cause this neglect or abuse, we don't want them to be back in that situation, but that doesn't mean that a grandparent won't be very caring and loving and take care of that child. And so that's the concept. But to get there, we have to locate these relatives. And that's where we come in, especially since we're dealing with Latin America and we're dealing with Spanish and Portuguese for Brazil. And in Central America, we may be dealing with several dialects, several indigenous languages. And I'm sure being in Africa, people can appreciate different languages and different dialects and the challenges of communicating properly with people in their language.
All right. Now, I understand that this can really pose a lot of challenges in your organization. Now, we're talking about identity crisis, which is very important, right? So I would like to ask you this question. How can you figure out this identity? Now, I understand that it's a really big issue, right? So, but do you think that your organization, right, has the capacity to help in this regard?
When it comes to identifying the relatives, it's not so much that we identify someone we don't know about. It's more of locating the people. So most times there is a name that can be provided, the name of a grandparent or the name of an aunt or uncle. Now, we can usually expand that search out. In some countries, it all depends upon how the information is processed. So, for instance, in Mexico, we've been in there for 25 years. So we have ways to look more generally. So let's say someone's name is Martinez and they're in a particular city. We can look for more Martinezes to see who might be related to that child. But can we do that in Guatemala? No, that's much more challenging in a place like Guatemala or even a place like Argentina. So everything depends upon the country as far as whether we can identify other relatives or not. Most of the time that information is brought to us.
Oh, now that's the work to do now. So I'd like us to talk about foster care in the U.S. Now, there's been a failing reunification efforts. So what are the key areas that you think they need to focus on?
Well, the big effort that needs to happen in the United States when it comes to foster care is this idea of family finding. It's a very critical activity, and it certainly makes sense. If you can find relatives, those relatives will often take in the child. Okay, sounds simple. The problem is there is not a university in the United States that is teaching family finding. So we have all of these very enthusiastic students going through a social worker bachelor's program or a master's program, and they are never hearing about family finding. So they're coming into agencies with no knowledge of how this activity works. They have no expertise. And what we're finding out now, unfortunately, is that throughout the United States, because of lack of funding, these caseworkers, when they show up for the job, they're not getting any training. Or if they are getting training, I'll give you for instance, in Texas, there's a judge who is overseeing their system because it's been so bad. Children are being abused at such high levels that a judge has taken over. And this judge has commented that they are finding caseworkers who are getting an hour's training, and then they're being let loose to take care of cases and kids. And again, I mention this because people may have the idea that these are experts, that these are people who have gone through 4 years, 5, 6 years of college. They have all this experience and knowledge. And the truth is they don't. And they don't know anything about family finding. They don't know how to locate a relative. And so sometimes they don't. And so that means the child is going to stay in that system for years. And that's a terrible outcome. Government is a terrible replacement for a parent.
Right. Now, Richard, if these children really can't be able to place their finger on any family, or let's say reunite with their family, now this is really a big issue we're talking about here. So what do you think is going to happen to them in the near future?
What will happen to the children if we don't do the family finding? Well, we're seeing it right now. We really are in that situation presently where children are aging out. And that means that they're being forced out. So they turn 18 years old in half of the states here in the U.S. And at 18, they don't get a birthday cake. What they do get is a bag, a plastic bag, a grocery bag, and they get to put their clothes in it. And then they get dropped off someplace. And that's it. That's the end of their support. They have no more money coming in. They may have some money when they walk out the door. They may not have any money. And they're dropped off someplace, and they are now expected to act as adults and to run their lives with no other support. No family support because we didn't do the family finding. So there's nobody there who's even able to offer emotional support. These kids are completely on their own. So what's happening is these kids are ending up being homeless. They're struggling day by day to find food, a safe place to sleep. They are at risk of being attacked, beaten, killed, because they are in very dangerous places because they are out in the open. They have no protection because they have no money. They have nothing set up for them. And this is happening to thousands and thousands of children every year in the United States.
Oh, right. Right. Now, let's say that they are back in the foster homes. So what are some of the critical issues these immigrants they face in the US? Now, I'm really emphasizing on this because I know that they're going to face a lot of issues in terms of, providing security for them, emotional security, employment. I think it's also important. But in this situation where you can identify who a person is, right, you can't trace the background. How can the government, be able to provide support in this regard? Do you like to share the insight?
So when it comes to immigrant children who are coming into the U.S., generally the federal government works hard to find what we call a sponsor. And that simply means someone who is related. So oftentimes a mom or a father has come to the U.S. maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years ago. They're somewhat stabilized. They have a location. And so when their child comes up, the federal government will reach out to that parent or that aunt or uncle and place the child with them. And at that point, then the child is considered to be in a safe environment with family. Okay. The problem is that those parents are also immigrants and they are not here with the proper documents. Now, this is not to have a discussion about legal, illegal, undocumented or not. The reality is that these adults are here in the country, and that because they don't have social security numbers, they don't have the right paperwork, they can't get a job and get paid properly. They can't get protections as a worker. They can't get medical care for themselves or their families. So they are the people who are in the worst financial situation possible, living in the US, going to jobs that pay under the table, pay in cash, pay less because no one's going to report abuse of not getting paid. They're not going to report the hardships that they endure, the harassment they may endure because of the place they work at. All of these are things that happen to these parents or these relatives. And that means that they are very vulnerable. And that vulnerability passes to the child because if the parent can't afford to stay where they are, they have to move. That means the child moves. And even though the child could go to school, that child is having to move around with the parents, which means their education is being fractured. They're losing stability. They may have had some friends where they were living and now they've had to move and those friends are gone. And this impacts children tremendously. And so these immigrant children are in that situation. And also because of this lack of stability and financial stability, things happen. Parents turn to drugs. They get depressed. They get stressed. They get angry. They start being abusive. And that's the perfect situation for a child to be caught up into the foster care system because agencies are out there to look out for the welfare of children. So someone reports that a child is staying at home all night because their mother or father is working. That child gets picked up. They get put into foster care. Now the system has to go look for other relatives. And if these children are from Latin America and speak Spanish, we're dealing now with caseworkers who are not trained, who don't speak the language, can't read Spanish, don't know anything about these countries. And the children just sit for years and years until they age out and now they're back on the streets. It's this vicious cycle that happens whether the child is a US born child or an immigrant. If they end up in foster care, ultimately, they may very well end up being homeless, going to prison, or being killed.
Oh, now really we are in a dicey situation now. These kids, they are, tangling between the devil and the blue sea. If they can't enter the US, how about taking them back to Mexico?
So when it comes to the immigrant children, the children are generally taken in. The parents, on the other hand, are often deported, and they're either deported to Mexico. Now, that doesn't mean that the parent came from Mexico. Many of these parents and families who are coming up to the U.S. that people have read about in the last few years are coming from Central America and South America. So putting them to Mexico, it would be like someone from Nigeria who's dropped off in Algeria. Do they have family there? No. Do they know the culture? Maybe yes, maybe no. So you've got people that just because they speak a similar language doesn't mean that they have protections, and they don't. And this is what we're hearing. There are people along the Mexican border who have no protection, no money, no way to feed themselves, and they are targets for the drug cartels, for the criminal elements, and for people who also want to put them into sex and human trafficking.
Right. Thank you, Richard Villasana, for your incredible insight on this show. Quickly, how can people become involved in helping these children? Because they are helpless indeed.
One of the best ways for people to become involved is first to learn about it. Nothing happens unless we're educated. And so a podcast like yours, you asking these questions is helping to get information out to people so they understand how bad it is. We have to know how bad a situation is so we can start to fix it. We have to know the problem. And as people know the problem, then the next step is to pick an organization that's making a difference. Now, in our case, everything we do is by donation. So we offer services to these government agencies for free. And so we're very successful, though. We are successful at about 85% of the time. We're able to get a child connected to a relative, and that moves them from foster care into kinship care. Whether they started out as an immigrant or they were born in the U.S., it doesn't matter. It's the same process once they bring a case to us. And the other thing is laws need to be changed, because we may have laws that make sense right now, and we may look at those laws and feel that that law covers all these problems. But at least what we see in the United States is we have to have other laws to put more force on top of the first law we have. It sounds crazy, but unfortunately, if we have a law that says everyone's equal, if we don't say specifically women's rights have disappeared over the last several months in the United States. That's because there wasn't something that said specifically women's rights are protected. So now they're looking to pass laws. Same thing applies to foster care. We have to have laws that say you will look for relatives, even if they don't live in the United States. You will look for them if they're in Latin America. You will look for them in other countries so we can move them into that kinship care.
Right. Thank you once again, Richard, for that contribution on the show. Do you have your website and your social media handles that we can connect with?
There are one best way to find us or to reach us is through our website, which is Forever Homes For, that's FOR, fosterkids.org. That's one of the best ways to find us. And from there on social media, it's easy for people to go to the website and then to find us on Facebook and Instagram. And again, shortly, my book will be out. And the reason I wrote the book is that it will put a lot of this information together, and it will give people a story so they can understand how these immigrant children came to the U.S., what happened to their parents, what's happening to these children, and what happens if they end up in the foster care system, and the failings of our foster care system and how we can improve the system to take care of these children as they should be treated. They all deserve to be treated equally and to be given the best opportunity possible to have a good life, and that's not happening.
All right. That's the food for thought, and we hope the necessary organizations we do the needful.
Could you repeat that one more time?
I said that's a food for thought, And we hope that the necessary organizations will do the needful.
We certainly hope so too. We hope that organizations will step up. Everything happens with people. It takes one person to put the light on a bad situation, but it takes the people coming behind it. I guess if I was to think of anyone recently, it would be Nelson Mandela, who kept fighting and fighting during the apartheid and got people involved and got people to take action. It wasn't just one person, but it is someone who steps forward and then is able to attract other people who then will push and push and push until you have change.
Right. And who will that be? Is it you or I? That's another food for thought.
That is definitely food for thought. Which person who is listening right now will decide that they will step up and help, whether it's to become a foster parent, whether it's to donate, whether it's to share their time and effort to help an organization. Yes, absolutely. That's a great call to action for someone out there, or many, to say, I will step up, I will help.
Right. It's such a worthwhile time having Richard Villasana on the show, on the Backstory with Omobola Stephen. Really had a worthwhile time. Now, if you like to catch up any missed episode of the Backstory with Omobola Stephen, you can do so on any cross-promotion platforms to bump into, or perhaps you like to be a guest on the show, sharing disruptive mindset conversations on topics of the government and politics. You can mail me at omobolastephen@alot.com, or perhaps you'd like to know more about me and what I've been up to lately. You can chat me on my website, www.omobolastephen.online. Now, I'll be looking forward to your mail and looking forward to connecting with you. I need you to be good till I come your way.